When the first Star Wars movie was released in 1977, I don't think anybody could have foreseen the franchise turning into the pop culture phenomenon and powerhouse that it is today. And yet, here we are, 42 years, 11 movies, and a shit ton of supplementary material such as TV shows and comics later, at the end of the Skywalker saga. Over the past 40-odd years, we've received a trilogy of Star Wars trilogies, one widely considered to be amazing, one widely considered to be total shit, and the other being so polarizing that it split the fandom down the middle. So I'm sure the question on everyone's mind was, will the final film in the Skywalker saga stick to the landing? Did the conclusion to an admittedly very inconsistent set of films bring the saga to a satisfying end? So before we get into it, this review aims to be as spoiler-free as possible. I will only be talking about stuff that is either very broad or was revealed in the trailers, but that being said, if you don't want to know anything about the movie, probably just don't watch this review until you've seen the movie. So let's get into it. The movie picks up with word of the Emperor's return spreading throughout all the corners of the universe, setting our main protagonists, Rey, Poe, and Finn, on a search to find and destroy Emperor Palpatine once and for all. And that's pretty much about as much as I can say about the plot without ranging into spoiler territory. So let me just say this really quickly. I've never really cared about Star Wars. For as long as I can remember, it's pretty much just been something that I watched just to watch, and I've never really been into it. I've always been more invested in other franchises. That's not to say that I've ever hated it, although I do absolutely hate the prequels, having rewatched those recently. I've just really never cared about the franchise, and it was never really my thing. I do absolutely appreciate them for what they've done for modern storytelling and movie making, and they should definitely be celebrated as a cinematic achievement, but I could just never get into it. Even the original trilogy, which I know might shock some people. That being said, there was something about the Rise of Skywalker that at a certain point just made me turn off my critical mind and just have fun with it. Now, don't get me wrong, this movie is a hot fucking mess, and for about the first third of it, I was not enjoying myself. The first act of this film is pretty bad. It consists mostly of characters just standing around and dumping copious amounts of exposition to each other to catch the audience up on events that happened off screen. And I feel like this is because this isn't really a sequel to The Last Jedi. This feels more like a sequel to J.J. Abrams' version of Episode 8, which is a movie that did not happen, for better or worse. The Last Jedi is very polarizing, but the extensive retconning and the way this movie goes in a completely different direction from The Last Jedi makes this film just feel very disjointed. Even the opening crawl feels like a full movie in itself, which we will never end up seeing. Very little to none of the stuff in the opening crawl happened in any of the previous movies, and as a result, this movie just feels like it's completely separate from the rest of the franchise. And this very much feels like the studio came to J.J. Abrams and said, hey, people didn't like The Last Jedi, so can you come in and fix this for us? Whether or not that actually happened, I don't know, but that's how it feels. And there are even specific lines in the movie that are basically talking directly to the audience saying, hey, you didn't like The Last Jedi? Well, here's some stuff that you will like. I can't really elaborate on that without spoiling stuff, but you will know it when you see it. But that feeling of we need to fix this and make something people like often leads to this movie playing fairly predictably and safe. And this seems to be a pretty common complaint from people, and from what I've been gathering, if you were one of the people who really loved The Last Jedi, you probably won't like this one as much, and if you hated The Last Jedi, you might really enjoy this. I didn't really have many strong opinions on The Last Jedi. I watched it probably about 3 hours before I saw this movie for the first time, and I felt pretty neutral about it. There was some stuff that I really enjoyed and some stuff that I wasn't a fan of, but on the whole I thought it was just mostly just fine. And that's largely how I felt about this movie. It's fun enough, but ultimately it's just fine. I should say the cast is part of what makes this movie so enjoyable. The core group of Rey, Finn, and Poe are at the best they've ever been in my opinion, and once the exposition is mostly out of the way, they're pretty much free to just give enjoyable performances with some fun dialogue, and I feel like it really gives a good sense of their friendship and camaraderie. I really, really enjoyed their characters in this movie, and in my eyes, they carried a lot of it. They made it better than I think it could have been. Billy D. Williams returns as Lando, which was seen in the trailers, and he filled his role well. He didn't have a ton to do, but what he did do, he pulled it out very well in a very charming manner, and it was fun to see him again. Kylo Ren is also returning, and I've never really been a fan of Kylo Ren, and this movie didn't really do anything to change that, to be honest. Adam Driver's performance is fine, but the character's never been super interesting to me, and that kind of stayed the same in this chapter. And again, Emperor Palpatine is back, played by Ian McDiarmid, and I'm not going to say too much about him for fear of spoilers, but he did as good a job as he always does. And actually, the scenes involving his character had kind of a creepy horror vibe to them, which I did quite enjoy. However, the one character who I just could not stand was C-3PO. I know he's a staple of Star Wars, but I've never liked him, and in this movie he came across as particularly grating to me. He was without a doubt the most annoying piece of shit in the entire movie, and every time he spoke, I was just instantly irked. But this was also likely the last on-screen performance of Carrie Fisher after her tragic passing a couple years ago. I don't know how much footage they had to work with. I do think they did the best with what they had, and Fisher always does great in the role of Leia, so that worked pretty well. There were a couple key reveals in this movie, and I won't spoil them, but broadly speaking, most of them didn't have too much impact to me, with only one packing any sort of weight to it, but the movie made up for that, I think, in fun action, and pretty great visuals throughout, particularly in the big, water scene. The action certainly wasn't anything spectacularly inventive, but it was mostly pretty fun, with a couple cool scenes sprinkled in there. There's one particularly fun chase scene at the beginning, and there is some also kind of cool lightsaber action. So on the whole, The Rise of Skywalker is pretty much exactly what I thought it would be. Pretty fun time, with nothing particularly inventive about it. The first act is a slog to get through for sure, but once the exposition is out of the way, it opens up a fun adventure spanning the galaxy. The story is pretty by the numbers, being 2/3 searching for a thing to do other things, and 1/3 final battle, but it's a formula that largely works due to charming performances and fun visuals that rates a 7.5 out of 10. But what did you think about the Rise of Skywalker? You can leave your thoughts in the comments below. This week, sometime on my podcast, Earth's Mightiest Comics, my co-host and I, Sebastian, will be talking spoilers and all that stuff about the Rise of Skywalker, so if you want to hear our thoughts on that stuff, you can go over to our website, which I will link in the description. So thank you everybody for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give the video a like, I guess, if you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.